Τώρα έχω πολύ μεγάλη χαρά να καλέσω στο βήμα τον καθηγητή της Ιατρικής Σχολής του Χάρβαρντ, τον κύριο Στέφανο Καλή, ο οποίος θα μας μιλήσει για τον πρώτο χρόνο της παρέμβασης στη διατροφή των Αμερικανών πυροσβεστών. Ήταν κάτι το οποίο το είχαμε ανακοινώσει πέρσι και ήρθε η στιγμή φέτος να δούμε τι νεότερα υπάρχουν ένα χρόνο μετά από την περσινή ανακοίνωση της έναρξης αυτής της πολύ μεγάλης μελέτης.
I believe we have a number of guests from various embassies and elsewhere, so I'm going to speak in English, but I can always answer questions later on. So as Professor Mayati said, I'm going to talk about the first year of this trial. I'm going to start with some background. So you all know firefighting is obviously a very, very dangerous job, but you might not understand exactly the reasons why. But in the United States, this is a picture of the memorial, the National Memorial for Fallen Firefighters. And every year, somewhere between 80 and 100 firefighters lose their lives in their service. See, the government does a report every year, and every year something more of the same. But what you can see here from this chart maybe is going to surprise you is that most of the deaths are not from smoke inhalation, they're not from asphyxiation, they're not from burns. They're from heart attacks and strokes. Sudden cardiac death accounts for 45 to 50% of all the deaths. And strokes or cerebrovascular accidents and other cardiac anomalies account for another 5% of these fatalities. So what is it about firefighting that's so hard on the heart? And you can see the same thing graphically here again. In red, cardiac deaths, and in blue and yellow, smoke inhalation and burns. So what we have learned over the last 25 to 30 years is that the strenuous duties and the stress of firefighter duties can provoke a heart attack or even a sudden cardiac death in an individual who is susceptible, which means that this is an individual who already has underlying heart disease. As you can see, the work is very strenuous. It involves both aerobic components as well as static components, so like weightlifting and running combined, chopping wood, something like that. The gear itself, the protective equipment the firefighters use to protect themselves, weighs over 20 kilograms. The tools are another 5 to 10 kilograms at times. And these suits are encapsulated, so the firefighters cannot dissipate the heat that they're generating during their work. In addition, the environment of fire is chaotic and dangerous. So the adrenaline, the epinephrine of the firefighters is going at full speed. Their heart rates are maximalized, and they can stay maximalized for half an hour and a half, as long as they're doing this job. And as you can see here in this slide, firefighting, the act of putting on fire, wearing all this gear, it's stressful on every single system in the body, but particularly stressful on the heart. And when we talk about the cardiovascular system, without going into the details here, which are of interest to doctors and scientists, you can see that it's stressful on every single part of the cardiovascular system. So on the heart, on the blood vessels, and it also causes thickening of the blood, which makes it more prone to clotting, blood clots, embolism, thrombi, etc. And for the last 15 years, our team has been publishing different studies about why firefighters die and why they get sick in some of the top scientific journals. We can summarize a lot of that work here in this slide, which is basically that all of the strain that we just talked about, in a normal individual, it's like an athletic event. A person might run a marathon, they might do kind of cross-country skiing, rowing. After the end, after eating, drinking, resting, they recover and they return to normal. But if that person has thickening of the coronary blood vessels or coronary stenosis, or they have enlargement of the heart and thickening of the walls of the left ventricle, what we call cardiomegaly, that's a Greek word. These people, and most of the cases, 2/3 or almost 75%, have both of these conditions simultaneously. These are the people who succumb to sudden cardiac death, and it's usually because of an arrhythmia. So we have to now turn to prevention. What can we do for prevention? And this is what brings us to what you do. Mediterranean diet or traditional Greek diet. Eating habits followed around the Mediterranean because that's where olive oil is from. Olive oil is the most important component of this diet. And as you know, the prototype of this diet is Crete. Crete was in the 50s and 60s the best example of this diet. Also places in southern Italy, which owe their heritage to Greece. They were Magna Graecia or Magna Graecia. So this kind of diet, even though now we refer to it as Mediterranean diet, is something that is really, it's inherent in Greek, and it's tied back to ancient Greek history. But it's a largely, in the 50s and 60s, a plant-based diet. 40% of the calories in Crete came from extra virgin olive oil, fruits, vegetables, other plant proteins, nuts, legumes, and fish. And other lean proteins, more so than red meat. Red meat in sparing amounts, and sweets also in sparing amounts. So, in theory, how would this work? What we're trying to do, it's not that olive oil or Mediterranean diet reduce stress necessarily. That's not very possible. We can't engineer or give a pill that takes the stress away from firefighters. But we need to use these interventions of diet to keep firefighters from progressing to these states of coronary atherosclerosis or cardiac enlargement. And as you can see, by eating olive oil, as we know, is basically, it's very pharmacologically active. And in concert with the other components of the Mediterranean diet, it's even more potent. And it reduces inflammation on many, many different pathways and factors. And in a prelude to the intervention study, which I've been asked to talk to you about, we did a cross-sectional study. We had a large population of firefighters in the Midwest, so this was very typical, authentic, red-blooded Americans, as we say. They were following most of them a typical American diet. However, we used questionnaires and we could better characterize their diet, and we found that those firefighters who were most closely following a traditional Mediterranean diet compared to those who least followed, who followed the most Western diet, there was a 40% lower risk in those following the highest Mediterranean diet scores, 40% lower risk of metabolic syndrome, which is an important precursor of heart disease and diabetes, a 40% lower decrease of weight gain, and they also had a lower cardiovascular disease risk profile. So in other words, higher good cholesterol, lower bad cholesterol, etc. Through these preliminary studies, both of how firefighters get sick and how diet could help and lifestyle could help, we were able to convince the Department of Homeland Security, which is part of the Ministry of Interior of the United States, to give us $1.5 million to perform a randomized cluster intervention study in the Indianapolis Fire Department, which is now registered through the National Institute of Health with clinicaltrials.gov. So just like a drug study trial, this is registered on the National Registry of Clinical Trials. In brief, the design of the project is that there are 44 fire stations in the city of Indianapolis Fire Department. It's a randomized or so 22 stations were put into the control group, 22 stations were put into the intervention group. Then individual firefighters in each station or house were asked to consent, and approximately 40% of the fire department agreed to participate, which is, I think, a very impressive number. So almost 400 firefighters agreed to participate in the study. As you can see here, in the first year, which I'm going to talk about, the intervention group receives education about Mediterranean diet, whereas the control group is usual care. They just keep doing whatever they're doing, keep eating whatever they're doing. And it's important for understand this study is not a feeding study, so we don't control what the firefighters eat. We're teaching them, but they make their own choices. How do we do this? We've created a Mediterranean diet pyramid, which is specialized for firefighters. Olive oil is very prominent in this. You can see in 3 different locations in the pyramid. It's also about lifestyle, so we encourage physical activity, doing exercise at least 3 to 5 times a week, and adequate sleep, as you see on the right. You can see that plant-based foods are emphasized at the bottom, and those items which are at the top are those which we should eat less of. And there's a wide wealth of educational materials on this website, and also videos. So one of the programs is called 5 Small Steps to Improve Your Health. The first step is throwing away butter instead of margarine, and using olive oil for all cooking, salad dressings, food preparation, and preparing, adding at the table. Drinking water instead of sweetened drinks, choosing lean proteins, and limiting red meat and processed meat whenever possible. Eating more fruits and vegetables, and choosing whole grains, or quesadillas, instead of refined and processed grains, breads, and pastas. There are a series of 6 videos, each approximately 4 to 8 minutes, for the firefighters to learn various aspects of Mediterranean diet. There are over 100 recipes, some of them prepared by nutritionists, others like this one prepared by professional chefs. And every 6 months, we collect a wide variety of data on them, including questionnaires, blood pressure, body weight, waist circumference, body composition, and then every year they'll also be doing a medical exam. The major outcome of interest of our study is something called a Mediterranean diet score. This is a score which is based on the questionnaires, and you add up points, and the higher the points are, the more this individual is following a Mediterranean diet. So over time in the study, the scores increase. It means that we're succeeding in educating the firefighters to follow more of a traditional Greek or traditional Mediterranean diet. So this is the major outcome of the study, because the study is too short to measure things like changes in heart disease, etc. So, what are some of the preliminary results of the study? First, we compared each group to itself. In other words, we compared the baseline measurements, or time 0 measurements, to time 6 months measurements. In the intervention group, the one that has access to the website and the other materials, they also have been given very generous donations of olive oil, many from some of the producers who are here tonight, as well as producers in Spain. They've also been given nuts and other food samples, olives. And what we see is that compared to baseline, there was a significant increase, more than 10%, in the average Mediterranean diet score. There was also evidence from the questionnaires that they were eating significantly more fruit, more olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, more nuts, and more unrefined grains. Furthermore, they were eating less fried foods and less refined starches. All of these were statistically significant. We can see in the control group here that there was no significant change whatsoever in the score. And even looking at multiple items, usually by chance we expect to find at least 1 or 2 to be significantly different. The only one that was different is there's some modest evidence that they're using higher quality oils in the fire station. This is not surprising because, after all, they're in the same fire department, so even though they don't have access to the website, they know what the study's about and they're talking to each other. So it's not surprising. I mean, everyone at this point, they know olive oil is good for you. Now, the other important measure is then in a randomized trial is to compare the intervention group to the control group at the same time point at 6 months. At baseline, there were no differences. At 6 months, we saw there is a statistically higher change, higher increase in the Mediterranean diet score in the intervention group. There's significantly greater consumption of nuts, and they're consuming significantly more extra virgin olive oil on a daily basis. We've encouraged them to consume at least 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil every day. So far, the results are very promising. I just show you briefly, in parallel, 70% of the fire service in the United States is made up of volunteers. So in order to get them in on the action, so to speak, we gave people who, through a group called National Volunteer Fire Council, an organization of volunteer firefighters that is all throughout the United States. We allow their members, if they want, to have access to our website, and they fill out questionnaires every 3 months. And what we see in those several hundred volunteer firefighters who are using the website is after 3 months, they're reporting, they're consuming, their Mediterranean diet scores are significantly higher, they're consuming more olive oil, less fried food, more fish, and they're using better quality beverages. In other words, they're drinking more water and perhaps wine as opposed to sweetened beverages like Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, etc. Another one of our goals is to promote this type of meeting and this type of education as widely as possible throughout the fire service in the United States. And we've done 2 episodes of a television series called Firehouse Kitchen. This is a show by firefighters about firefighters cooking for other firefighters in their family. And these episodes are called Survival Mediterranean Style. And these will come out next month, and they'll be shown nationally on a national basis. And in addition, the producer of the show, he's a retired firefighter from New York. He's very enthusiastic. He's going on a Greek diet himself, and he wants to film more of these episodes in the future. Okay, briefly, some of the work that's ongoing is to, within the 400 firefighters, we've had a random subset. We've also had measurements taken of the blood and the urine for certain metabolites of olive oil and other products of the Mediterranean diet. Hopefully the next time that I'm here, I can report to you on those results. We'll also be looking at something called the microbiome that has to do with all the millions of bacteria that live inside us. So this is being done based on stool samples, again taken from a random subset of firefighters who are in control and the intervention groups. And we'll be looking at something called metabolomics, which looks at specific types of metabolites that may be associated with a traditional way of eating or higher consumption of olive oil. I want also to remind you that we want to spread this beyond firefighters into other groups as well. And as you can see here, Mediterranean diet used to be a thing that was considered Greek or Italian or maybe on the fringe, even though it has thousands of years of history to it. But since 2015, it is recognized as a healthy way of eating by the US government's expert diet panel. And you can see here every year, a top magazine in the United States called US News and World Report, they gather a large number of diet, medical, and other nutrition experts together, and they rate different diets. And what you can see here is that in almost every category, the experts said that Mediterranean diet is number 1 because there's the most evidence behind it. And most importantly, it's number 1 in being easiest to follow. We are now exploring with the U.S. Department of Justice, rolling out the program, Survival Mediterranean Style for police officers. Hopefully we'll have some news on that in the next months. And together with some of the scientists, Dr. Struck from PREDIMED study, which some of you know about, and other physicians and scientists in Barcelona, we're collaborating with the SEAT, who's a Spanish automobile maker. I'm on the Occupational Health Committee, or Committee for a Healthy Corporation. And they have randomized, they have 3 factories. They've placed one of the factories. Those workers who wish to consent and participate in the study, they're participating in a program of Mediterranean lifestyle, which combines Mediterranean diet, physical exercise, as well as emotional well-being. And those results will be forthcoming as well. So I think this slide is self-explanatory. What I'm trying to say here is I do believe in everything that I'm trying to tell the firefighters and practice it myself. So I think, we should all walk the talk And you know, we can all talk about it, but action is better than words. In closing, I want to bring your attention to, some of you know, we did a program in Harvard several years ago, and then we had a program in Kaki last October. We have a colleague, and the continuation of these events is called the Mediterranean Diet Roundtable. It's happening in our sister university. It's a rival of Harvard, but we still advertise it. It's called Yale University, some of you heard of it. Professors Mayatis and Poole and Melio will be speaking there, so I think it's worthwhile, and some of you may want to sponsor as well. So I thank you for your time and your attention, and for the honor to be here.